Hey church, my name is Dante. I am the high school pastor at the San Marcos Escondido campus, and I'm so glad to get to bring you today's daily dose. You ever show up to something unprepared? And when I say unprepared, I mean you should have planned ahead or you should have brought something and you didn't, and so now you're kind of in this awkward predicament. I'll never forget, it was probably one of the most awkward moments of my life, but my sophomore year of high school, I showed up to a baseball game completely unprepared. You see, typically I played shortstop or second base, but technically I was our team's third catcher. So there was the starting catcher who played most of the time, the backup, and then I was kind of like the emergency catcher if anything were to happen to those first two. And my coach one day texts me and he says, "Hey, I need you to bring your catching gear because the starter was sick, the backup was out of town, and so I, as the emergency catcher, was going to play catcher that day." And so I drive to my game and I show up and I open the trunk of my car and I completely forgot the one thing that my coach asked me to bring, and it was embarrassing, and my coach got really upset at me, and the game was delayed because I had to call my mom to bring my catching gear, and it was just awkward, and it was not good because I simply was unprepared. You see, if you're going to show up to a game, it's probably important that you bring the right equipment. If you're going to go on a long trip, you need to make sure that you have the right supplies for whatever trip that you're going on. But here's the question. What if you show up to a battle or to a war? How do you show up prepared? And I'm not saying a physical battle or a legitimate war, but actually a spiritual one. And here's what the book of Ephesians tells us. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Here's what this passage is saying, is you and I, we are in a battle, but it's not a physical battle. It is a spiritual battle. And in fact, it's not something that we're going to be a part of. It's something that, especially as Christians, we are a part of right now. And as much as it is a reality that we live in a spiritual battle, we have a spiritual enemy who John 10 simply just explains wants to kill, steal, and destroy, that wants to do whatever he possibly can to separate us from God. But in this spiritual battle, the beautiful thing for you and I is we do have God. And counter to the enemy, he doesn't want to kill, steal, and destroy us, but wants to give us abundant life. And one of the most amazing things about this God is not just that he has life, but actually he has given us the abilities, the tools, the quote-unquote armor that you and I need to show up prepared and to overcome temptation, to overcome sin, to overcome the enemy. And the next part of this passage kind of describes this idea of truth and righteousness and peace and faith and salvation and the Spirit as all beautiful pieces of quote-unquote armor that you and I get to daily put on to stand against the enemy. So here's the challenge, is that you and I, we would daily put on this armor. But the question is, how do we do that? It's not physical armor, so how do I put on spiritual armor? Well, you live in it. When you see things on the news or in media that makes you a little bit unsure or make you a little bit uncertain of what's going on in the world, we get to put on the belt of truth, which is the Word of God, which is never changing, which is long-standing. When you and I, we feel uncertain and uneasy because of the chaos that is happening at home with our kids, with our friends, with the world, we get to put on this idea of fitting our feet with the gospel of peace, that you and I get to daily live in this power, that we have this mighty, awesome God, but actually he calls us to actively live in this power. And when we do that, we can defeat the enemy. When we do that, we can join him in victory. So my challenge, my encouragement for you today, church, is simply that you would put on the armor, that you would recognize that yes, we live in a spiritual war. Yes, we have a spiritual enemy, but we have a God who has already defeated that enemy and has given us the abilities to overcome him as well. Hopefully that encourages you. Hopefully that challenges you, and we will see you next time.